Hey guys, got another special guest today. Savannah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Savannah. Do you want me to say a bit more? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just tell everyone what you're up to right now, what you've been up to the last couple of years.
Okay. Sure. I mean, I'm 3 days into my first job, having finished uni. It's really weird because you've started the next stage, and I don't know how on earth I've done like in the actual degree because I'm still waiting for
Oh, wow.
results. So that's kind of daunting. But yeah, I've recently been elected as education officer of our students' union. Um, Little flex. I think Sheffield's like the best students' union in the country right now, so it is quite a lot of fun.
I've heard so many different people say.
They were
Yeah,
saying that since
I heard Cardiff say that they were the best student union.
Cardiff need to relax. Maybe in Wales, yeah. It's literally between us and Loughborough, depending on which poll you look at. Did you get what I mean? Like, there's like four
Yeah.
main polls,
Yeah.
and then it's like 2-2 or 3-2, 3-1. I can't remember. But yeah, Sheffield's an amazing SU, honestly. And even though, like, obviously, I'm doing this role now, I don't even think I use the SU to its full capacity, and that's probably why I ran, because I think there's people like me who don't, and they should, because it's there for them, and it can only cater to you if it knows what you want, if that makes sense. So yeah, and this year has been crazy. Like, I mean, I'm quite happy with the position I'm in now, considering to how I felt at the beginning of the year, because I was kind of down for like the first semester because I was supposed to be studying in Paris. And it would have been a great opportunity because it was a great uni, Sciences Po, and I think it came like second to Harvard in the world for my degree, politics and international relations. So it was nice to like have that prestige like at arm's length. And again, just the fact that I don't know, like I just know I'm not gonna bump into another working class Jamaican brummie. Like just that, I like stepping into places that others like me haven't been in before, so that others can come along. And it's kind of sad when that's kind of just like grabbed from you. But I suppose it's all about mixing and matching and finding other options. And that's what I guess I'm trying to do with this education officer role. I think I'm the first Black officer who's done this role.
Nice.
So yeah, the SU is really old. So like it's been about for a while. So for it to happen now, is nice, I suppose. It had, and so making the way for other people is
definitely
thing I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Get Cardiff out of the way. The last little bit you need is just it's gonna come from you. It's gonna come from you.
I mean, Cardiff, do your thing in it, but just don't claim titles that I haven't heard that.
Exactly. Well, that's amazing. And obviously, we first met when in student politics. So that was what we were saying this yesterday, 2 years ago, in 2019. As we don't know if we can say this word anymore, but then it was the BAME officers, and it was basically.
Guess what? I wasn't even a BAME officer. I was a BME counsellor, because the thing with our universities, we had a SU council, about 46 members, departmental roles and stuff, and they had one role for a BME counsellor. And I was in first year, knew nothing about student politics, and me and my friend were like, oh, let's for bants, like just apply for it, because we might as well, like why not? And I won that role and the NUS delegate role, because it doesn't have to be you, it could have been anyone. And so I won both of those roles with literally no experience of student politics. And when I got to the conference, I was so confused. Like, people were like, oh, they're BAME officers. I was like, we don't have one. And we even remember we won an award for best SU.
Oh, yeah.
I was so confused because at the time I didn't think about it, but I was like, yeah, they are good for Black students. But then when I got back to Sheffield, I was like, why do we not have a BME officer? Like, we don't have, like, we literally have a women's officer. We had a women's officer who covered LGBT and race issues. And it was like, and it was just like, it would always be like a random white lady, like, and they just kind of shoved it under. So for years we've been campaigning for something like, because minorities officers, because they would always say, if you have a BAME officer, then we need an LGBT officer, and then we need this, and we need this. And finally this year, the first year that we've had a liberation officer, who happens to be one of my friends from high school, which is really nice that we've all.
There you go. Nice. Really a good high school, churning out some big people.
Honestly, yeah, like it's weird. Like it's someone I never even spoke to at school, but then we've just both ended up on this committee together. And I think it's again like the first time there's been, I think, 3 Black people on the committee, much less 3 Black women. So yeah, it's been pretty revolutionary in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really weird about the having women officers as a title, but technically you're accounting for, like, for example, gay men in that with the other two things. So.
Literally, they did everything. It wasn't even fair on the officer themselves. Like, it was just really silly. And I think they were just, again, so worried about what to call it. And I was like, I don't know, liberation does in some ways have some connotations. Like, I think I really liked, obviously, I'm really happy that my friend won, but I also liked something another candidate said in the debate where she was like, she is conscious that there's a kind of white saviorism, the kind of sound to the concept of liberation officer, like to liberate the minorities from like whatever change or something. But I think it's one of those things with politics where sometimes you just can't get the perfect word. As long as it's functioning, that's the best we can do sometimes. Even like
BAME. Like half that conference was the name, not even any policy towards helping people.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like
I thought it was going to kick off. I thought like, it was
having literally, it's called Black Students Conference, and I go there and literally like the people on the committee are even Black, and so I'm so confused. And then obviously they explain its political Blackness, and
what the hell?
Yeah, like political, which if you understand, if you like look at the history of how the word Black has been used and how it's used as like an exclusionary term, it makes sense. But to a lay person, it's just like, what are you guys talking about?
It would make sense, but then it was like everybody, like political Blackness and minorities and that kind of like joint fight thing, apart from anybody who's white kind of thing. It was like, I don't know, because there was a lot of people that, I mean, they would be white passing as far as I was concerned, but would specifically say like, oh, if you're Polish, for example, from an impoverished background, that's different. And it's just so many like fluid and weird boundaries.
Yeah,
so
I saw someone sent me an article the other day. You know, like how I just have random friends, that online friends who I speak about politics with, and they sent me an article like saying this white Jewish guy saying he was disgusted to go to a conference and they called him Black, and he was like, he doesn't want to like be called Black, like, because he doesn't want to claim something that he isn't, which is like a valid point, but he didn't understand that the conference he was going to was talking about political Blackness, and in that case Jewish people did like come under that.
Right, I've never ever heard of this in my whole life, and I do.
It's like
I've never heard of political Blackness encompassing non-Black people. What?
It's like Indian people were called Black before. You know, Sharky always goes on about this.
Yeah, I was going to make that point. In the 80s, at least, I've seen plenty of like video footage of like groups, civil rights groups, and Indians consider themselves Black. Or I'd read you could read a document from the 1800s, and they're saying, oh, not 1800s, let's say like 1940, and they'll be like, oh, it's our first Black police officer, and it's an Indian man with a turban, but they called anyone who wasn't white Black because it's an exclusionary term. Because Black means you might be Black in England, but you might not be Black in Brazil, like, because it depends like on race is, you know, crazy. So
the only other people running for Birmingham were Indian. That's why I won, I think. They're all Indian, and they had a by-election because I guess not enough people wanted to go for it. So it's a weird space, but Louise will find that out very soon, I think.
I missed the deadline. Remember, I was so pissed off.
There's loads of positions to go in for.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's start getting into some of our topics for today. So, what was the first one? Okay, so shifting identity politics. So, like when we met, we were both, you called it yesterday, radical centrists. Where have you been at, and how was like the last couple of years shifting you about?
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, I'm not saying the political compass test is like the most accurate thing in the world, but I was literally like in the middle of the cross, like right there in the center. But yeah, since then I went to university, obviously, and I've always been, since like I've started uni, I've always been very open to like listening to different sides and everything, getting all perspectives. And so at the back of it's so annoying. You know when you said the other day you hate having a brain, Louise? Literally, like, sometimes I will think something as in my primary thought, and then at the back is like some other like political like version of me, like, yeah, but what about this? So then it's like,
yeah.
Literally, I remember going to uni and being like, maybe I'm just being brainwashed, like PragerU said, like these leftist universities trying to brainwash.
Yeah.
And then like when I was like, no, like logically this is making sense of the stuff I'm learning. I learned some amazing stuff. One of my professors, John Hobson, like he taught me a lot about just like the slave trade in general. I didn't expect to go into the module learning that, but it came up because you had to speak about like globalization.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just really frustrated me how much of I realized school like had not kind of lied by omission. So you're telling me I'm going to the Black Country Museum to, you know, test out the cotton mills and all, but no one said where the cotton was coming from. Like I just feel so
Oh my
scared.
God, I went on that trip as well.
Do you know what I mean?
I
Like
did now.
it was just so out of touch, or like the fact that I've quoted so many times in exams that we owned like 25% of the world, and we're so proud of this, like, as a Brit. Me personally, I was proud. I was like, yo, 25%. I don't know, but you don't know what the connotations of that are unless you actively go out of your way to look into it. And so, yeah, I mean, even I know it sounds kind of, I don't know how this is going to sound, but even learning about the nuances of the transatlantic slavery, how Africans actually were not just like kidnapped or tricked, but they'd actually had well-established, you know, trading systems with Arabs for like 5 centuries before. If anything, the Brits learnt from them. And I know I'm not saying like, oh, African slavers were in the right, but I'm saying that it's nice to see agency being given where it's due, and we're not just like these passive savages that were just there, didn't know what the hell was good. Like it didn't happen. Like Britain had to try really hard to get trading relations with Africa going to be taken seriously, because Africans were like, you guys are not bringing the energy, like you're not giving what you thought that you and yeah, like, and just how obviously there's hierarchies and civilizations in African countries just like any other country, and they function, people are oppressed regardless. It's different. I don't like when people say, okay, Black people sold each other. Like it's different because you don't say French and English people act a certain way because they're both white. Like I think we should recognize a cultural diversity in Africa too. But anyway, my point is that I learned a lot. The thing that changed my mind fully, like in this transition to like where my politics is now, is when it kind of clicked, when I was like, yeah, you've been lied to for a few years, is when one of my modules was British politics. And we did about Stephen Lawrence, and obviously the Burton report. And it was on this like page, another one of my favorite lecturers, like Andy Highmore, he like basically was talking about what systemic racism actually is and the definition of it. And I was like, you know what, regardless of like what certain people are maybe like consuming their content think systemic racism is, if people are saying this is the definition they're using and there's a lot of evidence to support it, then it is real and legit and should be taken seriously. And these people who have been like on the left have been paid as crazies, who are saying that there's this conspiracy of evil people, like that's not even what it is. Like no one's saying it's deliberate, at least not today. And so that's when I was like, yeah, let me look at every definition that I might be having the wrong like interpretation of. And again, like no matter what anyone says to me, like when I was more conservative back in the day, like which also was influenced by like my more solid like Christian views, but I don't care, because at the center of my politics has always been Black people and wanting the best for us. And so it's like, just because I had different methods or ideas on how I thought it should be approached in the past, critique me for the ideas, but not the passion or the intention that I had, the frustration I had with people, like, you know, what I thought was victimhood at the time, but wasn't really. It was just being painted as such by pundits like, say, Candace Owens.
Victimhood. That's an interesting one, because that's something I always thought about a lot in sixth form. Like I'd read so many like Instagram rabbit hole, you know, when you're just reading comments and then you just 2 hours later you're still reading comments. Like just like loads of posts about that sort of stuff, and then I would be like, yeah, especially I think about things in terms of like, stop being a victim, guys. Like we're still like, when I thought about it in like sort of an individual sense, I'm like, you know, we're not all like oppressed. if you want to put it that way or whatever. Then now I started thinking about it more in terms of like everyone does have that individual experience, and like even if you feel victimized in some aspects of your life, that doesn't make that your personality, or that doesn't encompass you as a person. But yeah, you are a victim in some aspects, and that can't be taken away from you. So I've thought about that a lot as well.
Yeah, I think another thing that is interesting, if there's two things to it, because like one, there's whether we can agree or not that said people are victims, like whether they actually are victims of something on paper. There's another aspect, even if they're not, the fact that they feel they are definitely hasn't experience for them. So like, for example, if I live in a world where I have reason to believe that I want to go to a situation and have this advantage, even just thinking that is going to put me at a disadvantage. On top of that, if it's true, that's a double disadvantage. So like, I think people who disregard it entirely need to consider at least the second thing is happening. And so it's a very complicated issue, obviously. But yeah, I think, you know, in terms of that, it's sticky. But I definitely really love, Savannah, how people can see your thought processes on social media. Normally social media, there's no thought process. You see a repost or something, but I can literally see you ask a question, take it in, consider it, and give your opinion. And I think that's so much more digestible than like a post I've seen reposted 3 times. So I appreciate
that comes across. Thank you. I think again, like with the victimhood thing, I don't even use the word anymore because I think of the connotations it has. But I mean, there is some legitimacy to it in terms of like being able to take control over your own life, and how at the end of the day, only you can control how you react to certain things or what you're going to do about it. Like, absolutely. But I think I realize that in a lot of debates and stuff, people tend to interpret, people who are against like and complain about victimhood, they tend to interpret it as, they just think that it's something that's purely reveled in, like in this very binary way. So this guy gave me an example. He was like, once I went skiing and I saw this 5-year-old little boy and he fell over and then he like hurt his leg or something, and then he just got up and he carried on. And he said he was like, and I was like, no, like he was a victim. No, he broke his leg or something, and then like I can't remember the story, but the point is that he got back up. And I was like, no, like I think you need to understand that he was a victim of an accident that happened. And then what he did was he didn't just go and walk on a broken leg like an idiot and not address the obviously, okay, his parents probably did because he was like 5, but the point is that you have to address the problem because you recognize you've been victimized by something, and then you don't revel in it. Like he didn't. Yes, we should congratulate the child for carrying on now that they've like been mended, but to ignore the fact that some like an injustice has been done is like so absurd. And I don't think there's, but again, he was like, but he's not a victim because he got back up. And I was like, no, like, okay, if you don't like the word, just say that. But by definition, he's still being victimized by something. And again, a lot of the time you're just debating semantics and you don't even get to like the actual issue at hand.
Yeah, that kind of brings us on to that point that we were speaking about in terms of, do people who make these arguments, especially these like more conservative arguments, just kind of break things down so it's down to the point where it's impossible to have that conversation as a guise of rationality, when really it's just a way to like distract away from it so they can keep things as they are?
Majority of them, not all, but I'd say it's like, okay, so a lot of my dissertation was about I don't know if you've seen the debates around like critical race theory, but it was kind of like in defense of critical race theory in terms of how it can function as a framework. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's not, it shouldn't be banned is what I'm saying. And a big chunk of like one of my chapters was just going through definitions and how a lot of time is spent on the semantics. But then what you realize is that even when you both understand and agree on the definition, you've done that, hours of debating, you agreed the definition, even agree that you just happen to be using different definitions, they'll still be like, yeah, so like the phenomenon you described doesn't exist anyway. And it's like,
so what would be your definition of critical race theory, just so we can get like a
I'd say critical race theory is it's more of a verb than a noun. So it's like, it's a doing thing. It's like a framework or a way of looking at something to
have you
so like
a lens or something?
yeah, a lens, like how you would use Marxism to understand something from a class perspective. You're specifically focusing on that. It doesn't negate the fact that other factors exist. It's just saying, in this case, I'd like to focus on race because y'all have not been like doing it very well. So for example, I think, I know it stemmed from critical legal studies in the 70s in the US, and it was kind of like that field kind of functioned to address the power dynamics in law and how it was reinforcing kind of oppressive structures that weren't helping like the people these laws wanted to actually help. But then critical race theorists were like inevitably like, okay, but you're not really talking about race. And it was kind of a response as well to the civil rights movement saying, yeah, we made great gains, but because it's like people are kind of complacent now because they think, oh, we've done everything we need to do.
Yeah.
And racism, as you guys can probably like just know, just like from observation, changes in its forms like over the centuries. So it just looks different as you go through different decades. So the point of it really was that racism's a lot more covert now. And so you can't be using the same solutions of, you know, color blindness, everybody love each other, basic equal rights, etc., when there's still some things that need addressing.
Color blindness. What do you feel about color blindness? I'm gonna go ahead and say that that's not a thing. That makes sense to me. Because I think in terms of like, I don't see color, it means I'm friends with everyone. Like, I get that you can be friends with everyone, but you do see color. Like, it's a factor.
It's because the people who tend to say it tend to be racist. So it's kind of annoying that it's got that connotation. But I think Coleman Hughes opened my eyes to a different way of using color blindness that I don't agree with him necessarily, but I'm open to the idea that color blindness in policy may be better than that's more what he's going for than race-based policy. And I'm just waiting for him to release his book in defense of color blindness. But for now, I am more in the case that the reason why, regardless of where I've been on the political spectrum, I've always hated color blindness. Like, I've always said that if you feel like you need to not see somebody for who they are to treat them the same, then you are the problem. You should be able to see people and their differences and still treat them the same, if that makes sense. Like, you don't have to see everyone the same, like as equal or blank states. You know, like those white Skittles, like all the same. You shouldn't have to see that just to treat people with respect. It's on you as a person to see the differences and still treat people with the same respect. I don't think kidding yourself or pretending people are the same. I don't know, like I get the concept, but most of the time they're chatting rubbish and they treat you differently regardless.
I think from what I can understand, correct me if I'm completely wrong, Common Humes, by the way, love Common Humes in terms of interesting thoughts to go with. I think from his kind of thing, I guess, is like, we need to have colorblindness as an ideal. It's not necessarily what is existing now, but we need to have something to work towards so that hypothetically, race, skin color can be like hair and eye color. I think him and like Sam Harris kind of have that thing where that's the idea, which I definitely like that. But I appreciate there's one thing to say that's where I'd really like to be, and another thing to say where we're at right now. So I think, like you're saying, most people are saying they went there right now and not appreciating the obvious links between race, culture, and racism and things like that. However, I just thought of it when you were saying the other way around. Like, for example, if you see me, someone might see me and then use your argument, let's say, to say, I see your color and I accept you for it. But unless they've had a conversation with me, they might be accepting the wrong things, right? So they might be saying, because you're black, I'm appreciating these things about you, but they might not be things about me. Do you know what I mean? There are certain things in terms of my position.
Can go wrong.
Yeah, for sure. Like they can kind of be sensitive to the fact that I'm black, and that probably means certain things about my experience externally, but like they could also have the opposite effect, you know what I'm saying, like and project things onto me. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know, like it's so contextual because okay, I don't want my teacher to assume that I'd rather do sports over like maths, like as they have in the past.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of people struggle with Coleman Hughes, for example, because I think you can be anti-racist and have different goals. So while Common Hughes might be like, I want to get to a point of, like you said, like you see it as like your icon and stuff. Some people are like, I freaking love being Black, and I want people to see me as Black and come up to me because I'm Black and be like, yo, like, I don't know, just inevitably, like, I might gravitate towards Black people just because it's, but then that's based on the environment, isn't it? I'm
Yeah,
trying
I think there's pros and cons of, like, it's a human thing to reduce like packed information down to certain patterns, and that's why also racism always going to come down to. There's pros of that, which is if it's a negative thing, I can be aware of that, which has more cons than pros, but you could say it from a pros point of view. There's pros to say like, oh, if I know that you're Black, I can make certain assumptions in terms of furthering like our conversation or rapport. Like, oh, if you're Black and from this country, blah, blah, blah. So there's pros, and then but there's cons. But I think a lot of people try and pick one or the other. You can't. You have to accept they all exist, but maybe try and account for the negativity more. But they both exist for sure. Like, you're always going to make assumptions and stereotypes. You can't do away with them. You can't. You know, apart from changing the actual facts. Like, one in that scenario, there's never
yeah, exactly. If we all were actually the same, designer
like,
babies.
if ginger people had always did a certain thing, then that ginger would become as important as race. Or if they were told, if we were told by the media that they did a certain thing. So either the media has to stop, or we have to actually stop being put in a certain position for that stereotype to not perpetuate, if that makes sense.
Imagine if designer babies was an actual thing and we were actually all the same. How insane would that be? Yeah. Sorry. But just actually think about it. Like, I swear, like, that would just be the maddest thing ever.
If we all had a baby, if we had what? Babies
that it would just all the same. Obviously, that I hope that never happens.
That is eugenics. You're talking about producing babies that are all the same race.
Like, terrible. Is it actually possible? Just a question. Is it actually like? Is it just illegal, or is it? Yeah.
I think so. What's that show called again? Orphan Black. Yeah, with the clones. They all tell different anyway, because it's all environmental. But yeah, I guess it would be an interesting social experiment, but also like mad unethical. So
yeah, a little bit. Just have everyone the same race. I mean, the place to get there would be difficult. But Black conservatism is what I want to put to you guys, because I know you both came from that place originally of juggling those two things.
Dun dun dun. Does that freak people out? I bet people who are watching would be like, Black conservatives? Ah, what are you?
Not even human. Ew. I've actually okay, so I'm on the left, but Clubhouse has been very interesting to, like, obviously listen to different viewpoints, access to different people, and Black conservatism is a lot more diverse than I thought it was, and I shouldn't have been surprised, but I'm disappointed also surprised. But my point is basically that there's a massive room and group of Black conservatives, a massive segment that are very much concerned about and want to use conservatism to fight white supremacy, for example. White supremacy as a social, like, construction, as opposed to, like, you know, just white supremacists is what I'm referring to. And it's really interesting. Like, one of the biggest, like, people advocating for critical race theory, for example, which I've been seeing, is this Black conservative guy. And a lot of the time it's because their conservatism is informed by, you know, like Christianity, evangelism. So, you know, it makes sense. And that's why I sometimes get really frustrated with, like, again, people on Clubhouse, like lefties, who will say stuff like, oh, I could never be friends with or speak to a Black conservative. Like, that actually make me feel like they hate people, they want everyone to die. I'm like, okay, but your mom's a you're really second generation immigrants, yeah, and your parents are more time conservative. Like, shut up. Like, this person who's feeding you every day and you're saying you never talk to them, you're performing, man, or you're not thinking, at least, because they think in such crazy binaries that there's just no room for, like, okay, disagree with, like, for example, I can disagree with women who I think, like, I respect that you have this choice that you want to, like, rely on your husband, like, for how to be a housewife or whatever, but I'm just gonna say I do low-key think there's some internalized misogyny there, and that you're kind of reinforcing like a bit of like you're not helping yourself by relying on someone. Like I will still comfortably have that viewpoint and allow people to do their thing and respect why they're doing it. These people are just like, they just come up with these crazy binaries about like you hate people, you don't want them to live, and while forgetting the whole context of why people may hold socially conservative views. Most Black people that I come across day to day have pretty what we'd consider conservative views on social issues. They just vote Labour because they're the only party that was really backing their civil rights for decades, like, you know, just loyalties kind of thing. And so it just really frustrates me, just that complete disregard for context, sorry.
Yeah, I feel like that gets to my, how do you say coined, but never mind, to me talking about narcissistic liberals. It's basically just a concept of a certain demographic of liberals who just want to shove all of this down your throat. And yeah, it's like, oh my God, if you're conservative, that means you hate everything and everyone, and that you just don't like people, and like you disregard like people's values and everything. And I just think to myself, how are you actually saying that? Like, that is the least nuanced thing I've ever heard. And you know, like people on like dating apps, they'll be like, I like chicken, I go on long walks in the park, I will not date you if you're conservative. And I'm just like,
I'm not gonna lie, I personally don't want to date someone more conservative than me, I'll be honest. Yeah. But it's not like completely out the park. It's just I can't be asked for the debates and stuff.
In this position,
to make it such a visceral thing, like how would you, like, do you know what I mean? Even if someone, it's like basically saying that even if you vote conservative, that means like you are inherently all of, like, do you know what I mean? It's just like saying like what is a conservative, or like, do you know what I mean? Like that.
I was saying to Savannah, do you mean in this position, so that a lot of their views are very strongly conservative and it kind of doesn't kind of mix well with your life if you were to share it? Or do you mean if they have voted it, it's just too sticky to you, that you want to say something and that will get you into too many arguments, if that makes sense?
It's like okay, if you're like a consistent voter of conservative like party, we probably just will not like have much politically to get along with anyway. But I think that it's just because the men that I happen to come across who are more conservative than me also share other viewpoints that just don't work like with wider things beyond politics. And there's only so many things. Like, I prefer someone who's apolitical and it doesn't really like pay attention and is open to like hear my perspective. And I don't want to say learn as though like I'm the teacher. You know, people say, learn and educate people. I'm like, okay, but you need to keep learning as well, moving like you're a professor, like everyone is learning from you. Like, critique me if you don't agree with something I say. Oh, that's another irk. Maybe we'll get to this later. I nearly went off on a tangent about how
tangents are always welcome.
I really hate the idea that, okay, you know how like there's this idea women can't take like accountability.
Yeah.
I have this theory recently where I think it's kind of rooted in the idea that when men and women have like debates, like especially in a relationship, women are like painted as like being the irrationally emotional one. And therefore there's this like men kind of teach each other, let them just bang on about it, have the last word, and then just keep it moving and that's it. And I'm just like, you don't even give women a chance to be held accountable or to have their ideas critiqued, because you just view them as emotional and not actually trying to rationalize what they're saying. Because emotions and rational are not, they're like often falsely like dichotomized for me, like, whereas they actually inform each other. And I just think that the things that men tend to be more emotional about are just like socially like more accepted or palatable. And so it's okay to be, but like when a woman's been emotional, like she's obviously being irrational right now, just let her bang on about it. Like, and I'm like, well, then how do you expect people to take accountability if you never actually challenge
you? Exactly. Like I always say in a relationship, if I say something not ridiculous, or if I say something I disagree with, please then come and be like, oh, Louise, let's just dissect what you've just said, and then we'll go on about it. Not just be like, oh, I'll let Louise think about
Honestly,
that, and then the next time we disagree about it, I'll go buy her something. Like, I don't want any of that. Challenge me at any point in time. And
I
that's how
hate it when men dismiss what I'm saying as if I'm saying it because I'm just being irrational or because I'm being
stupid or
emotional.
something.
And like, oh, let Savannah just bang on. And I'm like, no, like actually address what I'm saying like you would with your boys, yeah, and take it seriously. And don't just dismiss me because I'm a woman. Like I've never been so again, I don't know why I don't identify as feminist, but I think feminism is so useful for like analyzing like the majority of like social issues. Like the more I interact with and have male friends, the more I understand them to the point of being like feminists. I like kind of right, like even if I don't agree with how like some go about, at least the loud ones that get a platform,
Yeah.
that they are onto something. And it doesn't mean that I therefore dislike men or I now hate men. I love and more appreciate like my male counterparts, but it's like y'all need a lot of help. Like, and yeah, there's some women that don't help it, but again, and most of the time it's just everything's just in some way rooted in some form of misogyny. Like it's this cycle. This crazy cycle. And I can see why people can't be asked to be into politics because it's just a rabbit hole of like you will start to overanalyze everything, and that's not healthy, even if there's some value in what you're analyzing.
I guess that kind of ties into what you're saying about in relationships. If women tend to express, you say when they express issues, and then men are kind of like not giving them the space to have that communication. Maybe they're taking the point of view. This isn't my point of view, by the way, but maybe they are taking the point of view. They kind of go, we do this, that. If we start picking things apart to this level, even if we get to like useful conclusions for that specific point, it will dominate the relationship with negative energy and make the overall relationship not enjoyable to be in. I'm not saying, again, that's the opposite of me, actually. I'm definitely the kind of person who likes to communicate everything.
Yeah.
But what do you think of that?
I see some value in that, but I just don't think a lot of men think to that point. Sorry, maybe you're unique because like I find a lot of like complacency or like we're simple, we don't want much, and then like you turn around and like they're actually quite complex. And I think it's because the more complex you become, the more stereotypically feminine traits come out, and because that's not seen as something attractive or that you should
literally hit the nail on the head there.
It's like they're not willing to get to that point of view, and it's like compromise is important, and if you can't even reach a compromise, then why are you together? Like surely you can do that as like two. And I think it's because I think that you don't have to fully understand or be able to empathize, as in, you know, when like as in you can actually feel it, like you understand it, like, oh yeah, I've had that too. I don't think you need that to be able to rationalize something. So I can rationalize why you're upset and crying about this football game. Like you've been following them for years, but I can't understand it like in the same way. And I can rationalize why you're acting like this. I think it's a bit absurd. Like, you know, you're not going to talk to me for the whole day, but to some extent, but then in the same way, like, I don't want to say men, like, but men will like turn around and like, so a woman will be emotional about something. Like, I don't know whether it's a celebrity couple breaking up or something. These are very like stringent stereotypes, I know, but like, and just not willing to rationalize it. And I'm like, but I thought you guys were the ones wired to be rational, logical beings. Why do you just not want to pick and choose what is worthy of like being rationalized? And it's just
a lot of the time it could be that they don't want them to come to the truth. I mean, a lot of men definitely like to keep control.
They love to suppress everything that's amazing. That's another thing.
It's all coming out now.
They love to suppress everything.
No, it's okay. So it will get to a point where they are like, when you say about the emotional, like the deeper they are, the more emotional they are, the more feminine traits they have, rather the more conducive they are to having a healthy relationship. But that again, the higher that gets, the more they can become narcissistic, right? And then they just want to stop listening to first they'll be like, okay, let's analyze what you're saying. Like, I really want to challenge you on this, blah, blah, blah. And then it will turn into now I'm being condescending. Now it's like, yeah, you said this. but it's still not the way I've thought about it, or it's still not deep enough for me, or do you get what I mean?
You know what it reminds me of? The other day, I've had this debate a couple of times as well about how men sometimes will say to me like, oh, have you ever spoken to a woman when she's like literally being irrational, like ranting and everything? Like, have you ever tried to speak? And I'm like, yeah, like, you know, a lot of us have like, you know, parents will get upset with us sometimes, or like, you know, just like random like friends sometimes in debate. I'm like, but you, let me remind you, as a logical being that you pride yourself in, when's the best time to tell somebody your reasonable, well thought out, like viewpoint in the middle of the rage? Like, logically, let someone vent and get whatever they need to off their chest. Don't tell them to calm down, because it comes across as very dismissive. And then when they're fine, then talk to them. Like, I just think you should do that with every human person, but to expect somebody like in the middle of like when they're like, you know, venting or something, to be able to like just like, oh, as soon as you say something like some crazy stat or something, they're just gonna be like, yes, you're absolutely right. You have to the first thing you need to do, at least from what I've heard, or like, you know, is address like the issue, like try to rationalize it and see if there's any like merit to it, acknowledge it if it's there, and then if there's things that don't make sense, then address them. Like, but trying to do everything at once and then saying, oh, it's her fault for not, or even, you know, a man who might be doing the same thing, like raging, and then, or sometimes guys will say to me that they will like, they'll take out their rage, like they might have to like punch a wall or something after argument, or go play FIFA with their boys, and then they'll come back and that's it, it's fine, they keep it moving. I'm like, no, like, it's good that you went away and out of it, but you've just come back, you're not going to address it because you don't like the conversation, and then it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
It's just this ridiculous cycle of like complacency that I keep finding. And then again, like, I get that they're going to say like women will keep banging on about something, but if you don't address it, it's going to be banged on about. Like, I think it sounds obviously like really biased. I think women are like a bit further ahead in getting to the solution. But
I don't know if I agree with that, you know, because I've been thinking a lot about in the past year about like women and their toxic traits as well. And I feel like a lot of the time, like
I was going to touch on that, sorry, because it mid sentence that I was going to say that women are a bit further in like actually wanting to like have the conversation, but sometimes because again we also like perpetuate like certain toxic traits, we will like, as soon as a man is like, or a man who's more willing to do that, like, ew, like, why are you like moving like a woman, like, why are you trying to like be what, you're emotional now, oh, like, it is possible, it does happen, and it doesn't help.
It does, yeah. I think most things that we're talking about tend to be somewhere in the middle, in the sense of, so like I think, for example, you could say in the same dynamic between a woman and a man, and she's going constantly bring up an issue with a lot of emotion. I think you're quite right in saying that there's a reason behind that emotion. Doesn't mean there's not also a reason behind what she's saying. You can't divorce the two, doesn't mean there's no validity, and he should give her time to calm down and speak. But that's also taking away the agency that it would be better if she calmed down to formulate her argument and put it across initially calmly. And this, in the same way, he might be responding that way, not just because of abjectly not caring, because he might be fearing the intimacy that coming up in that conversation would give to him. Men fear women a lot as well. I think a lot of what comes across as misogyny is a lot of that is insecurity, and you know what I mean, and pushing women away or putting them something else, because really you feel that they're this thing that you're scared of, you can't appease or whatever.
All the can of worms, and they just want to rip you open, which is a good thing. We should all be sharing our. If you have a partner, if you're in an intimate relationship with someone, half of your feelings shouldn't be bottled up. Like that's so.
You're supposed to be able to be emotionally.
You're not really in a relationship if you're keeping half of the things to yourself.
Another problem these days, what is a relationship? So I guess we can go into this whole.
I don't know, they don't exist, Jeremy, anymore.
I have no idea.
Yeah, we've got too many. Okay, this is not me trying to be conservative, because I'm, you know, as I said, I'm still that centrist.
Uncle Jeremy.
But like it is the pros and cons you get with liberal boundaries of. Obviously, you have full-time, you have relationships. You've got your parents who are married or whatever they are. You got dating or whatever. You got so much in between that like the ground rules of how you should interact aren't obvious.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? So like someone might say, oh, why are you acting so much? We're just seeing each other. Why do you get what I'm saying? But clearly you've been seeing each other for 6 months. You obviously say stuff when you want something, I love you, blah, blah, blah.
Some people were married by then. Like
just because you haven't said boyfriend or girlfriend, you're living together, you do everything together, there's feelings there, but you're using that label to put off what you know you need to do to be on the same level with them. Do you get what I'm saying? So I feel like there's a lot of underneath stuff people got to figure out. No, if you're not in like a conventional thing where you can say like, oh, we're married.
You actually can't be in a non-conventional relationship if your communication skills aren't up to standard. It doesn't work. You'll end up being tears, ending like in something horribly, because there needs to be a level of communication where you can be having these conversations of we're this and this and this is the established boundaries and blah 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 blah. But loads of people don't want to have the
awkward ones.
Yeah,
like literally like if you're in an open relationship for some reason, then you decide that you have, first of all, you have to obviously establish the boundaries, and then second of all, if one of them happens to be you have to let the other person know when you're going to go and do something, then you chose that path. Like you're gonna have to communicate it, otherwise that is in of itself some kind of form of like cheating, because you're breaching the contract. And that's why I get why some people are like, I just can't do it. I don't think obviously like they usually say because of the jealousy, but it's just so complicated to like do those checks and balances rather than something, you know, a more like simple relationship where you're both like, yeah. But even those are complicated because
people are doing
micro cheating.
Yeah.
Literally like micro cheating. Yeah.
Micro cheating. So what, like in what you're saying in like full relationships, people do that same thing, but they do it through like emotional cheating kind of thing. Is that what you're
like, as in setting boundaries, like because some people, I think it's very easy to just assume how a relationship should be just based on what you've seen, and if you don't communicate that to the other person, you think there's a certain way your relationship should, like for example, I remember Abram preached the other day, they were talking about this guy came on saying like he feels like his relationship's really boring and they don't do anything and they should be going out and stuff, and he was like, okay, well, are you like happy with how it is? Like, do you like it? Like just sitting at home? And she's like, yeah, like, I normally do that by myself anyway. It's like, as long as like her silence is like comforting and it's not like you feel like you need to be doing something and you both enjoy being boring together, that's fine. Like some people go traveling all the time, and so in the same way, I think that you need to set boundaries. Like for example, oh, do you want this person to be like commenting under like other people's pictures like in a certain way, or do you like, and if you both can't hack these, then like just save yourself and just don't be with each other, or maybe you need to change something with yourself that is a bit unreasonable in some sense. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't literally, like I was scrolling through Instagram like about an hour ago, and I saw this guy who I know has recently got into a relationship, and like I always see his likes under like women with like bikinis and stuff, like women that look nothing like his girlfriend. And I know it's like none of my business, but I'm just thinking if that was my man, I'd feel like awful. But I don't know if that's an unreasonable way to feel, but it's just like I always see your likes under these kind of pictures. So it's just like, I don't know, like it makes me feel uneasy, but also it's not cheating. It's just,
I think you can't suppress those. Also, to be fair, I don't really like things on Instagram. But like, do you get what I mean? Even if you are in a relationship, you're still going to be looking at that person down the road being like, I want to bang them.
Absolutely. The thing is, you don't publicly announce it. Thousands of people who have nothing to do with it can see that public affirmation, which makes it feel slightly different. Like, it's not explicit, but it says something.
It's different. Like they could easily, as you say, just see it or wherever it is. They've gone out of the way to like it. What's that reason? Is that so it comes on the timeline, or is it so that girl knows they've liked
people do that as well? It's actually really weird because it is like that is just weird. Like, why are you liking it? Just surely just think it in your head and then move on.
It's not even your friend. Like, it's a whole band. Like, why? And I'm like, obviously, it sounds so possessive. Like you're saying someone can't double tap a photo. Do you know what I mean? Just so express, but it's, I don't know, it's just the connotations with it. Like I don't think we're used to this as humans. Like there's certain things we're not meant to see. Like, you know, social media, like if I would go outside now, I saw a video of Akala saying this morning, like if I went outside in my pajamas and someone thought I looked a bit funky, in their head they're saying, this guy needs a bit of help. He's not going to hear that. But then if they go and put it on his Twitter now, he sees hundreds of people say, like, I don't even know if we're evolved enough to be hearing so much stuff other people's opinions on us or seeing. It is mad, like,
Yeah,
I do think, like, in terms of like the relationship, I don't know, when it comes to relationships, Instagram, all that stuff should just, don't even look at it. Don't look at, you know what's so unhealthy for relationships? Snap maps.
Ooh.
So friends when they were a thing.
It's obsessive. Because then it's like, where are they? Oh, that looks like a house I've never been to before.
It's not just that, because you can, I mean, I've not had Snapchat for years, but like, if it's the kind of thing, because it exists, if you don't have it, it's like, why don't you have it on?
Yeah.
If you do have it, you're looking. So it's like best friends. Like,
why do they turn their snap maps off? Interesting.
Exactly, yeah. It should, but it's built for that kind of stuff. I think they do that all kind of stuff.
Evil. That is evil.
Yeah, my mom almost didn't let my brother get Snapchat because of Snap Maps. She's like, people can know where you are. Like, it's okay, mom. Turn it off. So I guess there's different reasons, but also I only have mine. I only let people who are like my close friends, like who I live with or something, see it, because like you never know if you're gonna get kidnapped. God forbid. At least they know where I am. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I can imagine the implications of that if in a relationship.
I think I found a mate completely drunk on night out with Snap Maps once, so you can.
No, you do find people on Snap Maps. It is good. I think it's a level of self-control, because when it's right there, you have to like be like, I'm not gonna look at Snap Maps. Like, I'm not doing it. But that takes a lot of thing when it's just swipe across and you can see where they are.
Yeah. I think as well, another point that came up with stuff we were saying is like, I think kind of the whole, you're saying it seems too possessive to say, oh, don't look at pictures like pictures, it's just a tap. I think that is kind of sometimes just gaslighting. It's just guys doing what they're doing, but then using like work rationale to make the girl feel like she's got nothing to worry about. So for example, if they've liked a picture, the girl catches him and he'll just be like, oh, but are you really that kind of girl? Who cares? Are you that kind of possessive girl? She doesn't want to be that connotation of possessive, and so she's like, oh no, you're silly. So that can be gaslighting as well.
I just think all the time, like, if you are going to do these things, like, do you know what I mean? If you are going to be looking at hot girls 24/7, I don't care. Just don't, like, for instance, porn. People in relationships look at porn, but they're not going to be like to their partner the next day, oh, by the way, like, I was just watching porn last night and blah, 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 blah. Like, just keep all of these things that aren't meant for relationships to yourself, and you won't have these problems.
You know, like, some people would argue that porn is what keeps them together because they enjoy watching it together. So it's all about literally setting those boundaries. And like, if you are actively watching porn in secret and you know your partner wouldn't like it, then it's just like, it just seems like a violation of this contract that you should have with each other, or at least should have been discussed at some point, because why are you hiding them? Like, do you know what I mean? It's a sticky one though. It is a sticky one.
No, you're right. It's all about boundaries, and it's not only the communication, it's also being honest with yourself in that conversation. So you need to actually admit, if you have certain things that you not tolerate, say it. And then, if you want to have 5 partners all together, if you want to do whatever, as long as you're both on the same page, it's cool. But I feel like a lot of people are getting into those situations because it's the thing to do, or they've been told that they're not woke enough, or they're falling into conventional monogamy and they're getting tricks, blah, blah, blah. But really, it's that they struggle to form genuine attachments, and they want to see with multiple girls. Do you get what I'm saying? And the girls who don't want to...
it's so difficult to like, you don't want to gaslight people about them saying like, oh, that they're polyamorous or something. But sometimes you do wonder, like, hopefully this isn't just that you've had like certain issues with commitment issues perhaps with people, but then at the same time, if you can commit to 3 people, then surely you're the expert of commitment. Like,
it's what I'm saying. Relationships in my head, open relationships only make sense if you're in one relationship and then you're literally just having physical relationships with other people. In my head, it doesn't make sense.
I know what you mean. Like, there's different types. Yeah.
But some people are like having actually like 4, let's say, boyfriends at the same time. And to me, that's actually, how do you have the capacity to be in that? Like,
so I've heard psychologists say that. I've heard psychologists say that you can only have like up to say 3-4 like really close relationships, and sometimes your family even fill up those spaces already. Which there's others. Like, it's not to say you can't have like extensive like friendship networks and stuff, but in terms of like people to invest in on a daily basis, like really that's it, like what you have room for.
Yeah, definitely, and it makes an impact that I think, again, we're not addressing, because I think with sexual liberation, which is really important, and don't get me wrong, this isn't trying to be like against any of that sort of stuff, it's come to a part where like we're not being fully honest about certain things that we do kind of need to be honest about. It's like, let's explore all of this and have all these things and break all these structures, but we have to be honest if we actually do want those structures in place.
For the implications of it. Like I am quite obviously I'm still like looking into it, but I'm quite like firm in thinking that regardless of your sex, that wait, why am I forgetting what the word is? Promiscuity isn't good for anyone.
Interesting.
Like, at least from what I've seen, like studies wise, in terms of like the mental health implication, I just think that because men in general don't tend to you know, think or care about their emotions anyway, or address them like effectively, or at least maybe they do. I've heard a lot of people push back and say more recently they just do it in a different way, and with their boys as opposed to women who might like actually put them down.
Yeah.
My argument would be, you know, doesn't mean to not try, like just find the right person for you that is willing to like have that conversation. But yeah, but it's then justified saying, well, men have like high testosterone and therefore they should like, they, you know, it's okay when they do. And it's just like, why are we acting like we're slaves to biology? Like, if something has been proven to be detrimental to you, then do something about it. Like, stop this like excuses like, oh, I have to do this because I won't actually feel anything. I just think it's strange.
Yeah, I agree.
Security is something that it just depends how you think about like sex. Like if you think sex is something that you can just do and you want to do and it doesn't really affect you emotionally, then fine. But I feel like for a lot of people, they're being promiscuous because of like what society is telling them. They want to go back to the boys and be like, I banged 3 girls last night, yay! Or like, do you know what I mean? Or they want to be like to other girls, like, yeah, like I'm available, I'm this much of a lad, I'm this much of a guy, like you can't tie me down, sort of thing. Then it's a weird challenge.
These are different.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be positioned as like it's evil. It can just be, okay, people like donuts, right? It's not good for you if you constantly eat donuts. It doesn't mean you're evil or a bad person. It means, yes, you might have an inclination to have that thing. Maybe it's a bit of a loose example here. You have an inclination to have something. Well, loads of things are addictive, right? I'm just making a silly example.
I had a lot of donuts yesterday, that's all.
There you go. It's not quite this. It's not quite the same thing, I guess. But like, yeah, there are certain things that you might want. Fine, you don't have to have, and if you have too much of, will have some negatives. You can rationalize to say like, oh, I exercised today, or it's fine, I treat to myself today, and you can say to yourself that it's not going to have an effect. But you really like at least do your research, because at least you're saying like, I think you're saying the important thing is that you are okay with that, but do your research on, again, it's a psychological, biological thing sometimes, like see what the research says about how that's going to affect you in ways that you might not be being honest with yourself about. And it does, people are different.
If you want to take that risk, then as an individual you can, but I'm just saying that like to glorify it without talking about the implications of it can be different. Like I think sometimes that's what there's critiques of feminism from all angles, but some would argue that, you know, more liberal modern feminism today kind of doesn't address the implications sometimes, and then it kind of says, you know, be free, but not what sometimes freedom can mean in some respects. So it's like I don't like, again, that term like women trying to be men, because I think again that has different implications that annoy me. But in the terms of sex, I think sometimes it can be like, men do this, we should be able to do it. You should be able to, but is it something to aspire to? Not necessarily. And the risk is so much higher for women. I just don't think the risk, like you can talk about the risk of sex and then provide what to do about it, but like the fact that you're the one that will have to be carrying a child and the implications of it if something goes in a way that you don't want it to do, men can't even sometimes empathize with that because it's just not something they're going to experience. And I know men will turn around and say, oh, but the financial cost, okay, but you're not going to die maybe in childbirth. Like, shut up sometimes, like just be real about
that you have to even go through anything that means that you're pregnant. Like there's so much about pregnancy that even when you're 2 weeks pregnant, like the psychological implications of that would be insane. And it's quite mad.
That's why I'm not.
And the contraception as well. Like the fact that there's no male contraception, that's really mad to me. I don't really know what's happening with that.
Or difficult ones. I've seen a lot about vasectomies. I'll see 2 videos at the same time saying completely different things. One saying it's reversible, you know, you should try it, and another saying it's usually not reversible, don't try it. And it's like, oh, it's difficult. It's really difficult.
It's a really interesting a thing on Netflix. It's all about like different things. So like childbirth, attraction, blah blah blah. One of them's on contraception. Really interesting. Like basically about its revolution of things. How once it gets into the market, there's no incentive to make another or better one until they get sued.
A better one. It's literally been the same since.
So I'm saying the reason why the progress is so slow is because because contraception is like on a macro scale is so beneficial to women, then they'll take whatever it is that they get. Basically, they'll do the job despite all the things it does for them negatively. And so there's no incentive other than the obvious moral incentive to make it better until they're sued out of it, and they make it iteratively better. And then that's also the reason why the male contraception is not happened yet, because all you need is to do is one person to be protected, and because women are now, or feel like now society has put the pressure on them to be, there's no need to put the money in to develop a male one. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's bad. Yeah. Like the pill is literally addictive, but it's so bad for you. It's literally some like sort of drug. Like once you're on it, it's like there's no going off this. Even though I might be infertile, even though blood clots, all of this stuff, like there's not really getting off it because it's just amazing.
What? In lifestyle or
just for lifestyle? And like, but the thing is, it's not like it hasn't changed since the 1960s. Like the formula actually hasn't changed. There's actually so many risks with it, but your doctor will be like, it's fine, it's the pill. It's the pill. Everyone's on it. It's all fairyland. But they can put money and time into making a better one that doesn't have all these random weird side effects like in the future and stuff. But again, like you said, they don't really feel like they need to.
Yeah. It's the problem with like when you have an issue in society, like something that's suppressed and you're not supposed to enjoy it, at least not enjoy it publicly, especially for women. It's like then you like super like overshoot it to address the issue, and then it's like, okay, but like this is like all the implications of like doing that like we kind of need to talk about. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is a very valid point. Women should be able to speak about like, you know, their sexuality you know, within good reason, like properly, without like the same without like over criticism. Yeah, in the way that men are like, it's fine for them, it's normalized. But at the same time, I just think that the risks aren't addressed enough. And it's like, oh, I enjoy sex, but also like, can we talk about other stuff you can enjoy that are less risky? Like, because why do you like, for example, you know, when people like have friends with benefits, for example, like I get it completely, but in the sense that if you're seeing this person like really frequently and you get along and stuff, it's just like, it's basically like borderline relationship. Like expect to be emotionally in turmoil. Do you know what I mean? Don't be surprised when certain things pop up. Like, okay, you see this person once a month, you never text them. Maybe that will function, but why do you need this person then? Like, if you don't need sex that much, like, do we even need? It's so. My head
Masturbation's a thing. Okay. I just want to put that out there. It is a thing.
No, you're right. I think
having mad sexual relations with people if it's not actually beneficial to your life.
Well, you don't really need it. Like, you can if you want, but I'm just saying, like.
Yeah, I think like what you're saying, masturbation has become like the centerpiece for female sexuality, like you're saying, exploring it in a safe way. And I think there's loads of really, really good important parts to that. But yeah, when it comes to sex, I think people need, as I say, need to be honest that lots of things are psychological and there's psychosexual stuff there. And you might think that what you're enjoying is just the mechanics of it, let's say. But yeah, it's intimacy that in other ways that you think that you're getting.
It's probably just that you're just missing out, and it's just nice to just feel loved in some capacity. Even then, like, yeah, it's crazy. And
so Savannah, tell us a little bit more about that concept you said the other day, manosphere.
Oh yeah, I find the manosphere very interesting right now. I think that it's changed the whole like concept of it just seems like an offshoot of the men's rights movement that has been like around for, you know, at least prominent like the last 5 years I've been seeing in the YouTube community, stemming again from probably incel stuff. But more recently, what's really interested me is specifically Black creators talking about like the red pill when it comes to dating. It's so widespread that I'd rather just keep it like specifically for the Black community. But a lot of the arguments tend to be around, again, there's different genres. Like some are talking about self-help and how to like, you know, focus on yourself and becoming a high value man. And so stop focusing so much on women and like, you know, sleeping around. And you've got others who are like, actually, women are things to be conquered, you know, kind of, I don't know, they don't explicitly say objects, but might as well say it in that, you know, this is how you can get women, this is how you can sleep with as many people, get as many women as possible. And this is the truth, because really women ain't like shiz and like, to do it. So but I'm more interested in the ones that claim that they are going back to traditionalism, and because most people can agree that's like that's sort of a stuff's misogynistic. But the ones who are saying, you know, back to traditionalism and you know the role that men and women should really be playing, and that these modern women, they're just shaking their asses and they're too unrealistic and materialistic. And if they do happen to be successful, they're too combative and masculine and not marriage material. So go for the more submissive women who are just, you know, beautiful and just do what they're supposed to do. That's the premise.
It's so dumb because like when you talk about the women shaking their asses and all that stuff, those are celebrities who are not representative of women in general. Like that's just clearly quite obvious. Like I'm very confused as to why that's like some sort of standard.
I wouldn't say that's necessarily true or necessarily the point. I think there are lots of women who, I think if we could say shake your ass as like, let's just say the TikTok culture, but that doesn't mean they're not.
Yeah, but like that's like what, like half an hour of your, no, like more like a few hours of your night at the club when clubs were a thing. And then the rest of the day you're actually just, you know, driving.
I get what you mean, actually. I get what you mean. Because it's like as if that defines you as like a person, how you choose to but then to some extent, whether you're a party animal or whether you're someone like, in some ways it is some inclination of like your personality type. But it's just, I think in some ways I was like, you guys are dictating to how everyone should be. Like this model might work for you, but not everyone wants to be like that. But then I'm like, but technically, if you've got the stats to prove it, you have every right to critique people for how they're living their lives. Like people who are complaining they can't find someone, yet are living in a way that is destructive. It's just that I'm not completely convinced by the argument of destructiveness, because a lot of the time, like people like me, for example, or even perhaps like Louise would be considered as like masculine women because we're very opinionated and like, you know, quite open and probably want to be successful in the future in terms of like a career wise. And it's just like, I just sometimes think sometimes they come across as a bit unrealistic, because in the society we live in, capitalism wise, you need two people to be making a decent income, like if you want to raise a child. And so you're actually very lucky if you can like have someone even there for the first 5 years or whatever, like for the child. That sounds like, you know, doing exceptionally well. And that's why I think, because they're so intimidated by the idea of adopting more feminine characteristics, which might be necessary for a balanced relationship in that sense, that, you know, obviously they've convinced these men that that's just not attractive at all. But I get where they're coming from, because there are some women, well, obviously a significant amount enough, who don't allow them to be able to do that. Like a lot of them just tend to be hurt men. Like, do you get what I mean? Who have like been in a horrible relationship and then kind of hate women, but they'd never call it hate women, because as long as I like to sleep with women and attracted to them, I can't hate them. Does that make sense? The rationale is rooted in a hatred that they don't recognize, but they think, oh, I like to sleep with women, therefore how can I hate them? And it's like, no, like some of the things you're saying are very dehumanizing, and don't. But again, like some friends will say, turn around and say, no, like I've learned so much from the Red Pill community, how to be a man. So then I'm like, maybe we're watching different content, because it's so vast. I'm just going to address the problematic ones.
Yeah, I think often even the same content can have the problematic and good. It's actually quite rare probably that it's separate, which is what is kind of the bigger issue, right? Because like you might have stuff that really works for you, like you're saying, self-help, X, Y, and Z, like coaching in terms of get your job sorted, blah, blah, blah. But then in those same people who you're now very much looking up to in terms of advice are giving you that same advice about women. And I definitely have seen what you're saying. And I also am weirdly seeing women giving men a lot of advice, men have a lot of advice as well. But I'm kind of thinking they've got it backwards, right? Like surely that advice actually should be for women, as in like instead of saying, "Oh, women are bad, don't go for them," or these types of women, or whatever. Maybe say like, "Oh, I think that maybe this would be don't do this type of thing if you're a woman if you want this kind of outcome." If that makes sense. So it should really be building women up rather than just saying tear them down, they're worthless or whatever. Which is, you know what I mean? That's not, you can't just forget about.
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of content of women who are like pushing for God, what is the phrase? Kind of like hypergamy and like I don't know, I can't say the word, like just hyper femininity and basic, especially Black women, because the point is that basically the argument is the trope of the strong Black woman is actually detrimental to Black women because they're saying that it means that our femininity and our fragility is like dismissed and we're constantly like just seen as like able to handle things, not allowed to be emotional and vulnerable. And that kind of trope, and it actually does us more harm than good. And I see merit in that to some extent, but I also think it also sometimes then leads to, therefore, an independent woman who knows herself is masculine. And it's like they're not necessarily the same thing. Like I just don't understand how you can be upset with someone who's career driven in a world that revels in career drivenness. Like, what do you expect? Like, to blame it on feminism when we literally live in a world that requires that to be successful is just a bit, I don't know, it just seems a bit out of touch.
Yeah, it's just like fearful. Like what Jeremy said, it's like, I always think this as well. When I or like thinking about dating or being in the sphere around boys, I'm like, God, I can literally see the intimidation in your eyes. And it's like, how is just me speaking about things like so crazy to you? It's like, oh, she's so pretty and she's like dancing. Wow, like I really thought that was just what she was all about. And then she starts speaking and it's like, what is she?
This kind of comes into the culture a little bit. Like if you're seeing women as, like you're saying, objects to sleep with, then what do you want to say? Okay, if they're dancing, having fun, you might think, oh, they're quite a social person. That might have connotations that are more easy to sleep with. As soon as you start saying something intelligent, it's like, oh, she respects herself. Do you know what I mean? And like maybe that's a reductionist way to say it. But like for me, where I see women in terms of where I see in terms of me, so my girlfriend, I see as a partnership. What do I want in a partner? Not somebody who's just basic, somebody who is interesting, who wants to kind of somebody I can see like building a life with, and so that means I want them to have X, Y, Z things. Whereas if I saw women as just like people to sleep with, then the advice is good, right? Like you would say like, oh, this is what you have to do to sleep with women who present this way, and this is what you have to avoid if you want that kind of material. So it's just about, you know what I'm saying? If we're celebrating like hookup culture, then we're going to get stuff like this, I think, to navigate.
Yeah, I do agree with you. We do celebrate that. And yeah, you are going to get that sort of like, what you are saying is pretty solid advice. The same for like, if you went to a girl, you were like if you do this and do this, then you can sleep with that guy and never speak to him again and it won't really matter. But like, we shouldn't really be seeing people like that, if I'm being honest. It's quite, but then, yeah. And it's just annoying when people don't respect themselves and then they wonder why they feel shit about themselves the next day.
I guess what's not fair is that like men can go through phases of sleeping with loads of women, but then still be seen as dateable men, whereas women can't. And I get that. That's true. But that doesn't mean it's like, because it's true, that's something to acknowledge. So I'm saying like, if you're giving advice to women, you might want to say, if you act a certain way, this is probably what's going to happen, not because it's right, but just to be aware of it.
I see the justifications though probably every week. A new TikTok video, someone saying, well, women have like the monopoly on choosing who they can sleep with. And it's like, yeah, but that's because you guys allowed that. Like, why are you allowing yourself to just be consumed by any woman that allows you to sleep with them? What, you're putting the onus on the woman for allowing you in her like personal space, and not the fact that you're basically admitted you'd never say no to anyone. Like,
yeah, that's mad.
What is that?
That's
Do you know
what
what I mean?
if you went, okay, so if, okay, I've had a girlfriend for 5 years, right? If I went on a night out and like a really good looking girl came on to me and I told my mates, oh, that girl came on to me, they'd be like, are you gay? Why do you not get with her? Kind of thing. Okay, maybe not my mates, but like guys in general.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Right? Because like, regardless of the fact that like she aggressively came on to me or I have a girlfriend or any of these things, it's like, but yeah, that's all stuff. I respect that. Like, she's great, but why would she not do this? Not my mates, but you know, the guys would do that. Whereas if a girl did that, even with an attractive guy, they'd be like, oh, that's so rude. How dare he like approach you? So I think guys almost feel obliged. I'm not even joking. Like, this might sound like a cop out. Not
No,
me, but I think guys feel obliged to get with girls because it's seen as like something you should be desperate for.
Yeah,
you know,
why
like,
wouldn't you?
A hungry person, it's food. It's
Yeah.
like you need as much of it as possible, which is not sex with me. Not one.
This is the thing though that we try and get at, that it almost like you, because sometimes you get there somewhere, you get somewhere, then you're like, you know, this is all rooted in like patriarchy, right? They're like, no, stop. It's like, yeah, but all the problems like we talk about, like, they just root back to like, you're doing it to yourself sometimes. And it's like, that's why sometimes people just say like, as some women just get frustrated and say, oh, go and help yourself, which I don't think is productive, but I can imagine like, I get the frustration sometimes, because sometimes men will complain about issues and it's other men perpetuating the issues. And if women are doing it, it's because they've learned it from other men.
I don't know. I don't have a problem with patriarchy if we say that it's a societal issue and society perpetuates it. I think the thing that doesn't work is because men think that patriarchy is like you are doing something wrong, but patriarchy is a thing where like
patriarchy is synonymous with men. That's what the issue is, I think.
But I mean, what I mean is the patriarchy, I can agree, puts a gender imbalance, but I don't think it's about men perpetuating. I think everyone perpetuates it.
I do agree. I think society.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can't say like men do better. It's everyone do better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think if you have like, considering like power dynamics, if you're kind of in the position to have more power to do something, then just logically I think maybe you guys should do it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Do you get what I'm saying? Like I'm happy to like say that women perpetuate like these same toxic like traits as well. And I don't want to use toxic and patriarchy synonymously, because again that like implicates other stuff. But do you get what I'm saying? I guess
I get what you're saying. I think there's an idea that it's happening to women, like they perpetuate it, but it's because they're made to, and then men perpetuate it, but it's because they're choosing to a little bit. Which, like, I get what you're saying in terms of power, maybe luxury of choice, but I think it needs to be more.
Yeah. But young boys aren't doing this on like they're not growing up wanting to hurt people or do things that are detrimental to society. They're being taught by. They do have mothers and fathers. They're just being taught by people, right? So I don't exactly what you're saying, like with Jeremy about saying like it's a choice for men and not a choice for women. I don't think so, because boys and girls are very much quite similar when they are 10 years old, 5 years old. Do you get what I mean? So we need to be teaching. I do think it's about the younger generation. If we are teaching the younger generation like similar values when it comes to being a man and a woman, then who knows, maybe society will get better. But I do agree that
thing, like, again, like I swear Kevin Samuels would like cry if he heard you say that, because he's like, no, like we're fundamentally different, we have different roles to play, and therefore just the idea that men cannot cope if they're not being a primary provider. And I'm like, just because I think he's right doesn't mean that I think there's a biological basis that means that has to be the case. And I think it can actually put pressure on men, hence mental health issues. If you're not fulfilling that, then you're not a proper man. But then I'm like, am I just blaming mental health on something that people should just be doing? And it's like, it's this cycle of like confusion, because unless I go out of my way to go and do an extensive study on this and dedicate my life to it, then even so, two people will come out with very different conclusions depending on what data you consume. It's mental. So that's why I get why you have all these like self-help people who like have like sometimes completely different. And again, Kevin, he specializes more in getting people married, and he is successful in that, but it's these people who are striving for that traditional way of living, but it's because he sees that as the optimal is the problem for me personally. Like, I think he makes great points about women being unrealistic about how many six-figure men are available and who are there, like, you know, and who want them, if we're being real. But then he complains about women wanting to marry up and how they're being materialistic, but doesn't talk about these men that he's saying are high value, perhaps are high value in their pockets, but they only want young, beautiful women. Why are we not critiquing that? Why are we not critiquing what they're saying they want and how feasible that is, and how sometimes it sounds almost predatory what they're asking for? But I don't know, like, he just, maybe I need to watch more of his content. Like, you have to see everything to have a valid point these days. Like,
I guess it works both ways. Like, if we want men to not have to feel they have to dominate and conquer everything in terms of like a financial and like just general social way, then we've got to start showing men that it serves to not be that way. Like, no, I'm not saying this is honest to anyone, but I'm saying that would only happen if women started picking men indiscriminate of how what's in their bank account. Same thing with women. If we stopped what's it called, only going for women that were a certain way of hotness or whatever, look or whatever, if we start going for women just because they are beautiful people inside and out,
beautiful people, exactly, like that word.
But again, if there is a biological reason or some intrinsic reason why women are going to keep picking men for power and money, and men are going to keep picking women for youth and hotness, then it's going to keep happening. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, do you see what I'm saying?
Only so far I can go, but I think the thing with us is we have the self-awareness to know how far we can go in some of these analyses, whereas these people come up with their little theory and then they create a whole platform, and then they have a bunch of like thousands of misogynists following them and worshipping them, because I get it, because there is nothing in the mainstream for men to discuss these issues like comfortably, and so then you just end up with the extremist ones who, and it's like, where else are they going to go to talk about this stuff, especially if when you do try and talk about it, there's no room for the nuance that is necessary for men to address their problems online, because they do sometimes slip into like and say misogynistic things, but sometimes you'll say the word female, and I'm not gonna lie, I get a bit when someone uses the word female. I'm like, like when a guy uses,
what? What's that?
Yeah, I'm like, I already know what's gonna come out of your mouth next. Not always, but a lot of the time. But they'll use that. Sorry, actually, you need to use the word woman. They can't even get through the sentence or profess what they need to say, or, you know, express themselves so that it can be analyzed properly, because we're caught up on like this perfection of how you're gonna present it. And for me personally, like, there's a way I try my best to like explain why using the word female is like, you know, questionable, and what it actually means the way we use language. But at the same time, again, what I'm saying basically is a lot of our conversations happen online, and there's just no room for that nuance when you have people like constantly on this like high horse of like correcting how someone can present themselves, and projecting their trauma on other people, like, oh, you can't talk about that because it's triggering me. And it's like, who can control your triggers? Only you can do that. Like, I'm not saying people can say any and anything, but how can you bring people to a platform to talk about the issues and then say everything's predicated about how you're going to feel about it? Like, you actually have to just remove yourself from the space, otherwise nothing will be solved. But me saying that is like problematic apparently in of itself, because I'm saying people should leave the room when issues come up, but I don't see any other feasible solution for it. If you want people to have these conversations and you can't hack it, then don't go away. I don't know how else to say it. Like, you can't be in the room then. Just you can't learn the language to use if you haven't even got to that place yet. Like, not everyone can just pick up a book and has you know, read extensively what language to use when they haven't even come to terms with the fact that they have a problem. Like, I just think it's a bit more complex.
I exactly what you're saying about the mainstream thing. Like, it shouldn't be in all these weird groups. It should be everyone talking about these issues together conducively for a better society. It should be
for conversations.
this
Yeah.
person at this age and this person at this age having a conversation, this person in this social bracket and this person, it should be like a
It's in
higher.
private. Wow. What's with all this public stuff? Everyone has to know. Like everyone has to see your revolution in public. Like there's no room for it. Like how can you? Yeah, crazy, man.
It's got to be a safe space and it's got to be allowed. A lot of people that don't like just the idea of what will be spoken about in that space don't want those spaces to exist, but you can't do that. As you say, if you don't want to be in that space, don't be there. But they've got to have to flesh that out. Like there has to be, if there's a room of white people speaking about can they use the N-word or not, that's, you gotta, they gotta, if they want to have that space, you can't stop that. But I wouldn't be in there because that's going to cause you a lot of issues if you're in there.
Yeah.
You can't dictate spaces. You're just going to have to, yeah, it's just about people figuring out their stuff and why they want to say that. For example, if that was the topic of that conversation, like what their issues are. But yeah, so this was really good. I know, Savannah, you've got a very busy schedule.
Yeah, I got to run off to a meeting, but thank you.
Got to, so this was a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll do it again very soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye.